Welcome to Open Ended with Peggy Lee and Geoff with a G.
Sing along, worship.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Well, once again, welcome to Open Ended with Peggy Lee Brennan and Jeffrey Hastings Haber. Peggy Lee and Geoff with a G. With our special guest, Barry Kolb. Barry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, man.
Where do you start?
How about start at the very beginning? Because you have a great story.
Well, way at the beginning, I was born, I'll be 77 years old in September.
Oh,
Wow,
good
you look
number.
good.
Good number.
So back up 70 some years ago, I was raised in a little town in Nebraska, Seward, Nebraska. I was there this last week, actually, while on my visit to the annual visit to the College World Series.
Fun.
I was raised by my grandparents. They were farm people, and part of it was my father had been in prison at that time, but it was kind of a wonderful experience. The neat thing was my grandpa, after the tornado destroyed the farm when I was just a baby, moved into town, took a job being the janitor of the church, school, and parish hall for St. John's Lutheran Church, School, and Parish Hall. So I was kind of raised in a church, in the parish hall, this town of Seward, Nebraska, which was about 3,500 people when I grew up. It's kind of like living in Mayberry.
That's
That's the way I always think about it. Courthouse Square, all kinds of things around the courthouse. I literally walked across the street to go from kindergarten to 8th grade. And when I was done with that, I walked across the street, past the school, across another street, and went to Concordia High School, which was on the campus of Concordia Teachers College. So I did kindergarten through college within about 3 blocks of home. And was basically doing the kinds of things that people growing up in a town do. Competed in sports in a small high school. I thought about this the other day, being at the College World Series. Played on a couple of state championship baseball teams. Our school won a state basketball title. I learned a lot about winning in high school, learned a lot about losing in college.
That little town kind of sounds like Hoosiers.
A little bit. We were a school of 150 kids and
150
150 students, right?
Student,
and the college maybe had 600 or 700 when I was there.
Okay.
But college was a time of losing. I got hurt in football, ended up swimming, of all things.
That's good for therapy.
Oh.
It is. After
that,
that, I was out to be a teacher, and I was sent out to be a teacher and spent my first 18 years of professional life as a teacher. I've done everything from being an elementary school teacher, principal, spent a lot of time as a high school and actually a college basketball coach.
Oh, fun.
Ended up overseas for 3 years in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong International School, where we played away games in the Philippines and Taiwan. And this is during the tail end of the Vietnam War. So I had some opportunity to do an occasional chaplaincy role on board of the ships that were coming into port. At that time, I think the largest nuclear aircraft carrier was the USS Enterprise, and so we got to play out there and play against their team, and did that, and then back to the States to coach high school basketball in Illinois.
How did you get to Hong Kong? I mean, how
Well,
did
by
that
airplane.
happen? But
Oh, no.
because I mean, from this little town and this little college, all of a sudden you're in Hong Kong.
Well, there's a newspaper that's put out by my denomination, and they had one ads, and we were living in Decatur, Illinois, where I was teaching and coaching at that time, and I picked up the newspaper, and I saw an ad for teachers at Hong Kong International School. And I said to my wife, "Isn't this where your friend Paula teaches?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, they're looking for teachers." I said, "What would you think if I applied?"
Now, how long have you been out of college and teaching at that point?
Oh, let's see. I had been out 7 years.
Did you have kids?
We had 2.
Oh, my word.
So this was kind of a gutsy thing.
Well, and what I didn't even know what I was hardly applying for, because they had an opening for social studies teacher. I thought what might be an interesting thing. And this was like in December. I sent in the application. I got a reply back and said the headmaster would be in the States doing some interviews. I interviewed down in St. Louis, Missouri, and he said, "How would you like to be the athletic director of grades 7 through 12?" And this was a school of about 1,600 students, K to 12, and coaching basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, I would be interested." About a month later, they said, "Okay, we'd like to hire you." And by July, we were living in Hong Kong.
How was your wife and how old were the kids?
Oh, let's see. My kids were going into 1st and 3rd grade.
Okay, so they were young.
So our daughter was in 1st grade, and Josh, that's my grandson. My son Eric was in 3rd grade. So I was kind of kidding them. I said, it's kind of interesting. By the time you went into 4th and 6th grade, you'd already been around the world, and it was a world-class education.
Yes.
It was a phenomenal school. Coaching overseas was interesting because our American kids tend to be bigger. We competed in what amounted to being the college division, and while we managed to win 3 colony championships. And we hosted a 16-team basketball tournament at Christmas. 8 girls' schools, 8 guys' schools from all over Southeast Asia, like American School in Japan, Dewey from Philippines, places like that. And after 3 years, it was about time to get back to the States.
Yes. Now, your wife's girlfriend, were you at the school where she was teaching?
Mm-hmm.
How nice. So she had a friend.
Yeah, and in fact, this last week when I was at the College World Series, my wife went back over to Seward for a day and spent some time with her friend Paula.
Wow.
Did the kids love that experience?
Oh,
when they
yeah.
Look back?
Yeah, they really enjoyed it. It was a great time for them.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, my word. Oh, my.
So that took me through, back that time. And when I came back, I was looking at 3 different jobs that I had in front of me. One was to be, I think, a director of Christian education in Paso Robles, California. It's somewhere between San Francisco and LA, I guess. I kind of looked at the job description and I thought, they're going to try to add the 4th person to the Trinity here. I was kind of like to be the savior.
Oh.
And I wasn't interested in taking that spot. One of the other jobs was to be the athletic director and basketball coach at the University of Wisconsin Baraboo campus.
Mm-hmm.
I went up there, did the interview, said I'd think about it. When I came back, they offered me more money. And I said, you could have offered me what you were going to pay me early without doing this to me.
Oh, yes.
And at the same time, I had an offer to be the athletic director, basketball coach at Valley Lutheran High School in St. Charles, Illinois, which is a Chicago suburb. And I was there then for 8 years.
Oh, I bet they were a good team.
We had some good teams there. We were a small, growing high school. It was about 150 when I got there. The first year we had seniors, got up to about not quite 300. We ended up competing against a lot of larger schools, but always held our own. And it was kind of at the end of about 8 years. I was thinking, I'd always kind of wanted to be or thought about being a pastor. And we had some scholarship money available. So I told my wife, rather than working basketball camps in the summer, I'm going to go to the seminary just to see what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to Concordia Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Take that break a moment and be right back.
And we're going to take a quick break. Acid. Relief.
Well, we have a $100 giveaway this week. The sponsor is H2O Zone. Last week's winner was Larry Melton. So keep watching AMG Broadcasting for your chance to win. I have a question. From all you're saying,
Well,
it
you got
sounds
more.
like, oh, do we have more? On the
If
back?
your company
Oh.
wants to sponsor the $100 giveaway, make a donation of $100 on axmediagroup.com and receive a full week of advertising. A lucky audience member wins $100 per week all summer long.
Ooh, that's
there
pretty
you go.
good. Woo, yes. Okay, from what you were saying, it sounded like you were pastoring in a sense as a coach,
I was.
right?
And but I'd always kind of wanted to be that way because I told you I grew up in the church, and I used to turn on the microphones at St. John's and stand in the pulpit and pretend I was preaching and reading and stuff like that. But I went to Concordia just for summer school. First class I took was History of the Lutheran Church in America. I come from that background. And when it was over, I went back to the dormitory, called my wife, and I said, I think this is it. So I took summer school, and for like 3 summers, I actually took my Greek at Wheaton College.
Oh, it's good school.
Good school. And finally, the last year, when I racked up enough, we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And lo and behold, when I got there, I was immediately hired to be the women's basketball coach and softball coach at St. Francis University. So I always make a joke that the Catholics paid for my Lutheran seminary education, which was a good deal. From there, I had to do vicarage, which is kind of like your interim practice year.
Mhm.
And we said anywhere but the Midwest. So they sent us to Richland, Washington. And in Richland, Southeast Washington, Richland, Pasco, and Kennewick, to do my internship with a pastor that I think I was maybe a year or two older than. So at the end of 2 weeks, I'd accomplished everything he wanted me to do. Didn't know what to do with me. So I contacted KOTY and another, as an AM, FM, country western radio station, and sold myself having a radio show.
And you had never done any...
I had done some in high school, but up to that time, not really. So I started a program called More Power.
Oh, good
And
name.
they gave me 1 hour on Sunday mornings from 6 to 7, became popular, went to 6 to 8, then 6 to 9, then 6 to 10.
Oh, my word, 4 hours.
And I introduced, contemporary Christian music to the Tri-Cities area.
Okay.
Wow.
So, when you start out your, 106.5 Hawk FM, so enjoyed doing that. 1 year, then they sent me to my very first church. My very first church I get sent to is a church of 1,600 with a school of about 250 in Belvedere, Illinois. I actually walked in the front door. The guy who was the head pastor said, "Do you want to be in charge?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "I shouldn't be trusted." And so I literally, within months, became the senior pastor of that church.
Where did he go?
He stayed there.
He didn't want
And
the responsibility.
it was absolutely wonderful. His name is Gene Willie, and Gene is just a jewel.
Oh,
He is really good at what I call rubbing sheep. He
Mhm.
liked to make hospital calls, shut-in
Oh,
calls, and he said
okay.
he would do that to free me up to set the vision and the mission of the congregation. So spent 5 years there, then moved on to a church of a little over 3,000 in central Illinois. Did much the same thing, restructured. Then started a mission up in the Chicago area, which grew very rapidly. We were able to start with a 16,000 square foot building and had a preschool. we had put a 34,000 square foot addition onto that building. And I was there for, I don't know, about 12 or 13 years before moving to Texas. Somebody called me and said, we have a church down there that could use somebody like you. And I said, how bad is it?
Uh-huh.
And they said, well, they'd lost over half their members in the last couple of years. So
Whoa.
we moved there. And then all of a sudden after that, I thought, I'm done going to church meetings that always end the same way, which is, Pastor, what do you think we should do? Well, send me an email. Don't waste time on a meeting.
Yeah.
And ended up moving over closer to our children in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Ended up the next 2.5 years in interim with a church that also lost half of its members. And at that point, I said, maybe we should move to Branson.
Why Branson?
Why?
Well, our kids have a timeshare
Okay.
at Big Cedar for many years. So we've been down. I've been to the NEI basketball tournament at College of the Ozarks many years. It just seemed like a nice place for ministry.
It
And
is.
since then, I've just got myself involved in a whole bunch of other ministries. So that takes you up relatively up to date.
My jaw. Amazing. Did you enjoy pastoring? And you were a fixer-upper. You fixed
Yeah, I
things,
enjoy
right?
that. Something I developed a long time ago is just the words vision, mission, and passion.
Okay.
And God's blessed me in a way to be able to see things, I guess, where you have a godly vision. Mm-hmm. And the vision is really centered around the mission, which to me is discipleship and evangelism. And then you do that with passion of the Holy Spirit. And so I do see the vision, live the mission, feel the passion. That's on my business card. That comes out of coaching basketball, the same thing like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I like to get involved with things where I don't need to see a change for my benefit,
Mm-hmm.
but I enjoy seeing the change in people's lives. I mean, that's part of the reason I really so much enjoy prison ministry these days.
I just realized you and your wife married when you were teenagers?
I was 19, she was 17. I married her when she graduated from high school.
How'd you meet her?
We are the reason, well, I met her on a blind date, but we are the reason the teenage divorce rate is as low as it is. But this was a boarding high school. I was a day student, but when I was a senior and she as a sophomore, we were looking to get dates to go to a campus movie. I couldn't think of who to call. And so there were about 6 or 7 guys sitting around a telephone calling the various dormitories. And one guy walks out. I can blame a guy by the name of Jim Schubarth for this. He said, oh, by the way, I got you a date for tomorrow night. And I said, really, with who? He said, Nancy Miller. And I went, Nancy who? This is a high school of 150 kids. I didn't know who she was. And so I went home, got my yearbook. She's not there because she didn't come there her freshman year. So I had no idea who she was until I picked her up. Meanwhile, she's sitting at the dormitory saying, I wish Barry Kolb would call me.
So she was a sophomore?
Is that true?
Yeah.
She was a sophomore, you were a senior?
I was sophomore and senior, and then I married her after the end of my sophomore year, and she graduated from high school.
So when she opened the door, how was the exchange?
Then I knew who it was because
you did.
I remembered her from the student center because my friends and I used to pick on her a little bit. So
my
I won't go
goodness.
into that and embarrass anyone.
So at a young age,
Yeah.
what do you attribute the
Longevity.
longevity of your marriage?
Yeah, hanging in there.
That's
Well, you start with the basic stuff. I mean, do you love this person? Yes or no? And I mean, it sounds trite. Divorce is never an option. That's never on the table.
Yes.
We've been good friends and, have enjoyed our families. We both come from, interesting families. Mine's a little bit more broken than hers is. Hers is a bit more nuclear. When I do marriage inventories for couples, I always say we're kind of polar opposites.
Yeah.
She's from this all-American kind of family where it's they love family reunions and everybody's business is everybody's business.
Yes.
And I come from a group down here where your business is your business, and why go to a family reunion to see a bunch of people you don't really like or something like that? But somehow we got in the middle.
Yes.
And we'll be married 57 years in July 13th.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a ministry nowadays to be married
Yeah.
after 5 years still married.
Well, with your different backgrounds, did you tend to gravitate more towards her family reunions than yours?
Well,
if your family had them?
I'm not a big reunion person anyway.
Yeah.
Believe it or
I
not, I'm much more of an introvert,
That's
which is okay.
You don't. I mean, I would not peg you for being an introvert. It's very interesting. I mean, you can sit there and be at peace with yourself, but
Yeah.
you have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So it's.
But what is an introvert, right? That's a good question that we will come back to.
Okay.
And we're going to go to another
our-
break. And we are back with Barry Kolb. Hi, Barry.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing your life with us.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yes, I was just talking about you being an introvert.
Yeah. What is an introvert to you then?
I can be alone.
Uh-huh.
I don't necessarily need people to. My wife will say, but when we see you in front of people, or like when I interact with the guys down in prison, I can be that way. But I'm also the kind of person, I mean, it's been kind of a joke. My wife always said, we need to invite a whole bunch of people over on Sunday. I'll put a pot roast in. I'm kind of like, oh, dear God, please no. After I've preached 3
Yes.
services or 4 services,
Yes.
I'm ready to go home and die
Yes.
or just lay there and watch.
Mm-hmm. To recharge in a sense.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Yes, we get that. I want to hear about your prison.
So are you
stay.
on work release, parole? I mean, let's share about the prison issues.
Yeah, okay, prison. I think I talked to you a little bit about that. I got into prison ministry kind of backwards because, I mean, it'd be something I would have never thought about doing.
You didn't go to prison on your own.
Oh, no. And I probably escaped prison over the years. I told the guys, if one difference between you and me is some of you got caught, and I didn't. But I might have shared this with you. I had been up speaking, attending a worship and music conference in Edmonton, Alberta. Took my music director with me. And he said, I'm going to stop in Minneapolis to go to John Piper's church to lead worship, and then I'll be home. So when he gets home, he comes and he flips a card on my desk and said, "This man must meet you." And I've looked at the card, and I said, "Why must he meet me?" And he said, well, he came up to me and he said, "Is your pastor a biblicist?" And I had to ask him what that was. And he said, "Well, does your pastor love the Bible?" He said, "Yeah." Then I need to talk to him, he said.
Oh, interesting.
Well, his name was Manny Mill, and it was Koinonia House National Ministries. It was a post-prison ministry, happened to be in Wheaton, Illinois, which was not far from my church at that time. I just threw the card on my desk, and I thought, he might have to meet me. I don't need to meet him.
So you weren't interested?
It didn't do anything to me. A few days later, I get a phone call. It's Manny, and this guy just talks 100 miles an hour. He's Cuban. Thick accent. "Oh, Dr. Kolb, you need to come over and talk to me. And I'll take you up for a big Cuban dinner." So I thought, okay. So I drive to Wheaton. He comes out of his office, kisses me on the cheek, and I'm like, oh, man. He hauls me off to a Cuban restaurant, tells the waiters, don't need any menu. He tells them what he wants, bring it all out. He's gone out, and I go home, and my wife says, "What was that all about?" I said, "I have no idea." He's in post-prison ministry. Guys who get out of prison, he tries to get them going again.
Was he had been a prisoner?
Well, yeah, I'll get to that. But a couple of days later, it's, Dr. Kolb, you need to come to Wheaton. Go take you out to dinner. You might meet some of my friends. So I go, and he's got 2 other friends there. I get home again. My wife says, "What was that like?" And I said, "It was interesting. I was the only one at the table who's not served time in a federal penitentiary. And I'm the only one that doesn't speak fluent Spanish." She said, "Who are these people?" Well, Manny had been I think a salesman for Prudential, laundered money, fled from the FBI to Venezuela, did all kinds of stuff. The other guy had been the head of one of the major gangs in Chicago, who actually became a minister. One of my good friends, Bishop Michael Carter. And the third guy, George Valdez, had headed the Medellin drug cartel here in America, and actually went to Pablo Escobar and said, "Not interested anymore." He's written a fantastic book. I think it was called Coming Clean. But And then I said, envision me walking down the street holding hands with these guys singing. So jump ahead a few more days, and it's, you need to be at Midway Airport tomorrow morning at 6:30. We're flying to New Orleans. And I'm like, what? So I go there. We fly to New Orleans. We're met by Chuck Colson's prison ministry and driving us 2.5 hours to Angola prison. Now, this is the largest maximum security prison in America.
It's a country club.
It's 6,200 guys on an 18,000-acre working farm. You've got the main prison. You've got camp C, D, F, J scattered around. We spent 2 or 3 days touring around. I spoke at their Bible college, interacted with these guys, and sitting the last day with Warden Burl Kane, who's done a lot of stuff in great prison reform. He said, I'm starting to graduate some guys out of the Bible college and stuff like that.
So there was a Bible college in the prison?
Well, yeah, what happened was the state of Louisiana cut their Pell Grants, and so he convinced New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary out of New Orleans to plant a Bible college and a seminary in the prison.
Could you give a little background? Angola, I mean, wasn't there an infamy to Angola? Was there like a horrendous riot there, or several?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on. It was called the bloodiest prison in America. Jesus. And it used to be, you read stories about how they'd be working on the field and the guard might say, run, and then they'd shoot him and they'd bury him in the levees. When I was first down there, I was in the line to eat, and some guy bumped me. He says, Doc, I'm sorry. He said, but in the old days, you could have put a knife in me for something like that.
Yes.
They tell me how they used to put newspapers and magazines inside their T-shirts to block stuff, and they'd have a partner. One would sleep while the other one would watch. But when they introduced Christianity into that prison, everything began to change. So literally, I tell people, they have a hard time believing this, it's the Christians who monitor the climate in this prison and make it easier for everybody else.
Not the skinheads, not the...
No, and so I've been doing this for the Warden Kane actually said, well, what could you do to help these guys? And I said, well, one thing I know we could do was to plant churches or fellowships in prison. And they've done that. I don't know how many we have today, 30 or 40 of them down there, pastored by some, lifers. I mean, most of these guys are lifers. They always talk about time or numbers. And some guys got both, a life sentence plus 100 years, which makes no sense.
Is there a death penalty there?
Yeah, death penalty. They have life. What we call it life row. It's death row, but on life row, some people still come to Christ there.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
I like that.
So I started doing, I guess what you'd call continuing education. And so I started out with, 50, 75 guys, and I would just teach all week and pick a topic. And then in fact, the first day I taught, an officer came to pick me up to take me back to the ranch house, which was a facility in prison where the warden entertains people for lunch. And I said, why can I not eat with these guys? And he was like, why would you want to do that? And I said, because it gives me more time to hang out with these guys. And I was doing that for, 2, 3, 4 times a year. I would preach at most of the different fellowships in the evening, got to know these guys. And then about 8 years ago, I had a friend who called me and said, can I be involved in this? And it was a person I'd met in my very first church. And so my teaching partner is very interesting in that she's female.
Yeah, going into the men's prison.
Yeah. And
Billy Graham might have issue with that one.
God bless her.
That's his problem. He's not around anymore to argue.
Hey,
But when I first met her, she was an assistant principal of a public high school, in charge of student discipline.
Oh, wow.
I always tell the guys, you mess around, Miss Cheryl's going to deal with her. She's also become an assistant superintendent of schools and served a couple of times as an interim superintendent of schools. So she's a very intelligent person, gifted biblically, and had been through some of the Bible classes that I had been in and taken. So I think for about the last 8 years, we've been team teaching. The interesting thing is, this kind of surprises people. If we're going to teach, for example, the book of Galatians for a week, she does all of the exegetical teaching. And when it's done, I said,
Strengths.
Right. And it's worked out well.
Now, you do this. Oh,
Right back.
and we're back with Barry Kolb. Barry, I was going to say, you do this volunteer?
Well, yeah, nobody's paying me to do that.
Now, how do you not? I mean, you're a preacher. I mean, it's not like you're, and I don't think you're a televangelist.
No.
How do you navigate this with your job professionally? I mean, how you're able to accomplish all this? It's amazing. I mean,
Do you
this
sleep?
is, and it's not down the street either. I mean,
Do you sleep?
What's
Oh,
the
yeah.
closest you ever lived to Angola?
The
You've been doing
closest
this
I ever lived
23
to
years?
Angola was when I lived in North Richland Hills, Texas.
And how far was that?
I don't know, 6-8 hours. So, we
So
go
this is
now
a-
from Branson. We leave and my wife and I will drive about halfway, and then we meet the next day in Baton Rouge because we've added a second prison, Hunt Correctional, which is only 2,200 people.
God bless you.
Cheryl does a 2-day drive. She lives up in northern Illinois, so she'll drive halfway, and then we meet and then the next day, after we teach one day in Hunt, we head back to Angola. And typically they have a guest house. We stay in the prison. And we're there then for another 3 days and teach a variety of different places. So it can be grueling. I mean, there's no doubt about it, the travel. We were committed to saying, I mean, I've always been committed. I'll go down there. Nobody needs to pay me anything. In fact, when a lot of people ask me, can you come and speak at our church? And I say, yeah. And they say, well, how much do you charge? I say, I don't need to be paid. I mean, my retirement is fine. But it does cost us to go down there because we are committed to giving guys materials. And one thing we've been doing for the last 8 years is we give everybody a brand new study Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been privileged to deal with John MacArthur. And there are some people, because both of us come from a Lutheran background.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go with the Lutheran study Bible? And I said, well, if you give them to us at the price John gives them to us. And he's actually sent them free because he's actually visited the prison. So they get a nice, well, it's the Bible I had in Bible class this morning. And we also give the guys a pen. We give them some 3x5 note cards because we also say during the day, you might have some questions. And we'll put them in this box and we'll take the time to answer all of your questions during a break. We actually take hard candy. They like that. But for us to go down there, typically it costs us about $3,000. It's $20 a Bible. And we have about, I don't know, 5 or 6 churches that support our ministry. And the money goes directly back to the first church I pastored who handles our finances. So we're not a big time deal.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We cover our expenses and anything else, travel, that's our
Did you ever, in your early days, feel called to be involved in any aspect of prison
Like a
ministry?
chaplain,
Like,
No.
quote unquote.
No.
So it just was, this is it. I mean, it sounds very fulfilling, and you're ministering.
Yeah,
so
I
to
would have
people.
never, ever thought about that. Like I said, my father was in prison. I didn't really know him very well, hardly at all. Although I would tell you, he was the first funeral I ever did. I was just finishing seminary and they called and said, can you do your father's funeral? And it was kind of like, yeah. So I flew from Fort Wayne and drove all the way to Ogallala, Nebraska, cowboy capital, Nebraska, and did a funeral for somebody I really didn't know very well.
Did you see him throughout your years at all?
Saw him occasionally, showed up at my high school graduation, and I think he might have showed up at my college, and he stopped once at our house. But,
What put him in prison? How old were you at that time?
oh, gosh, I don't even know. It's been so long ago. There's a few things I don't remember.
But that's so interesting, asking that question, because, boy, are you giving back. It's amazing. How much energy? Do you sleep a lot?
Oh, I sleep well. I can prove it because I got a sleep number bed. And I tell you, I've been at the College World Series. I got home. My score was 95 the first night, which meant I was almost comatose for 8.5 hours.
Okay.
No, I sleep really well.
Okay.
But it's been really a fulfilling time for all of us because even when I walk into the main prison, it's hey, Dr. Kolb, hey, Dr. Kolb. And I would say, but Dr. Miss Cheryl, but they always say, is the Queen with us? And I said, yes, the Queen will be at worship tonight. And so my wife is called the Queen. That's kind of Black culture, or the First Lady.
Yes, how sweet.
And so we walk in the first night, and it's like, hey, the man of God is here. And I always look around to see what they're talking about. And the Queen. And
how beautiful.
so it's a unique experience.
It's amazing. It's coming from virtually, basically, no father to being a pastor and
Father
a
of so many.
coach.
Well, I told you before, I got a bunch of, there's a prison email system called JPay. Guys can't just email anybody. They have to ask me to contact them. So I have a group of guys, core guys, and so I got a lot of Happy Father's Day cards from them or notes. But, part of this being down there, we have not been able to be down there since a year ago, February.
Because of COVID.
We're going back now in September, middle week of September. It was like, what can we do since we can't go there? And so starting of March last year, I started writing words of encouragement, about a page and a half. And I send it down to these key leaders. Mm-hmm. And about once a week. So I've written, well, I don't know, 60, 70 of these things once a week. And I said, and read them to the other guys in the dormitories and stuff like that. Well, two of the guys work at the prison radio station, KLTY. And so they hustle them down there, and then they read them on the air. Now, here's really funny. It's an FM station, which is about a 30, 40-mile radius. People outside the prison have heard them and called and said, who is this doc guy that sends these things? So we've been able to keep in the contact, doing some teaching online that way. But now we're looking forward to, I think we're down there September 13 to 17, something like that. I'll celebrate my birthday in prison this year.
Amen. Amen. Do you have a scripture verse that you'd like to share before we?
Well, how are we doing, Johnny, with time? Are we down to 4 minutes? 3.5 minutes.
Well, I always like Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not in your understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him and make straight your paths. I like that one. I mentioned in Bible class this morning, Psalm 1 was my confirmation verse about, blessed is a man who doesn't walk
counsel of the ungodly.
And I was seeing, that's a downward thing, and I remember thinking at the time, I might be talking about my friends. But I love Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
Yes.
It to me is an encouragement. One of the messages, I'm maybe end with, if I kind of end with this, I always talk about having victory. And VICTORY, and to have victory is better than losing. And so there's V for vision, to have a godly vision of your past, your present, your future. Mm-hmm. To be a person of integrity, that's the I, undivided heart. Your C is for commitment. You're committed to the Lord Jesus Christ for the long haul. T is for tenacity. This is where you hang on in the dark times until the light shines again. The R is to be ready to serve. I learned that from my grandparents, because the first church I was at, I tried to help clean off some tables after. They said, Pastor, you don't need to do it. I go, yes, I do. Ready to serve. And then the Y is yoked with the Spirit. So VICTORY.
What's the O?
Obedience. I'm sorry. Be obedient. Be obedience to the scriptures.
Obedience is better than sacrifice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that seems to function pretty well.
What a blessing. Oh, my word. What a blessing.
And you also lead worship when you did you help with the worship at the prison or whatever?
I preach, but I've just told them in the last couple of years, I don't need to do this, the preaching. I teach all day long. Yeah. And the guys down there are such great preachers anyway. And
so you mean the inmates?
Oh, the inmates.
They're
wonderful. And a lot of guys have now gotten out in the last couple of years. And I had to mention 4 of these guys I had in classes over the year are the brand new 4 chaplains at Parchman Prison in Parchman, Mississippi. Wow. So to see guys serving life sentences out and now going back to prison and helping their friends.
Giving back.
Yeah.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Well,
before we leave, 30 seconds. Is there any question you want to ask us? 30 seconds or less.
Uh-oh.
Oh, gosh.
Uh-oh.
How long you guys been doing this?
A year. We did our show in Branson at Hot Hits last year. They came, some of the media people, and then we were on shows. And after the 4th show we were on, They said,
It's
would you
COVID.
start your own show?
COVID
And
showed
that,
me the door out of New York City. I
yes.
got back here full time with Peg and Leah,
Open-ended.
here we
For
are.
your chance to win $100 every week.
And don't forget, you could win $100 every week.
Well, I thought this was going to be really difficult with some guy out of Yahoo out of New York who was going to be really, really
Amen.
abusive or something to me today.
I keep him in